All right, we are continuing on with our shoulder health series. This is video 2 with my man Jordan. What are we doing next?
Okay, so first video we addressed sort of inhibiting the anterior structures of the shoulder that are going to cast us into that flexed, adducted, and internally rotated, that upper cross posture. So now we need to focus on balancing out rotational forces in the opposite direction, so activating our rotator cuff. So what we're going to do first is, let's landmark first what we're going to be targeting today. So rotator cuff, all housed on the scapula. So the two we're going to really be addressing today, the infraspinatus, so that lower 2/3 of the scapula, and the teres minor, that lateral border of the scapula. So to address these, we're just going to have to progress, not resistance, but position of stability as we move through that arcing motion of the shoulder. So this, when we're standing at our side, is our most stable shoulder position, right? So oftentimes we need to do very little to address stability in this position, but it's a good starting point.
Now, do you find that this is because the muscles underactive because they're forward so much that these muscles don't get a lot of attention, or like?
Yeah, they're fighting against a torrent, right? Think of the muscles that internally rotate our shoulder, how strong they are, how capable they are, the pecs, the lats, the anterior fiber, the deltoid, the long head of the bicep, things we train often. Rotation and isolation is not something we train very often. There's one prime mover, and it's something we'll get to later in the series, that will externally rotate the shoulder. That's a rear delt. But rear delt versus pec, how much can you rear delt fly versus how much can you
and not to mention, a lot of people do rear delts wrong too.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. So isolating the rotator cuff, again, this is stability. So the progression of stabilizer muscles is never resistance. So this band will be with us the entire time. What's going to change is the perception of stability in the joint position that we're training it at.
Okay.
So starting first, neutral shoulder position, straight down, think of drill bit coming up through that olecranon of the elbow, straight up into the humerus. So what I see a lot of in external rotation is extension and abduction. That's going to start recruiting that rear delt. What I want you to do is keep that locked in place. Even if you have like a water bottle, a towel, something you can squeeze against the side, and just pure external rotation. Now, it's not dose dependent, where if people look at this arcing motion and they think, oh, if some is good, more is better. So we'll see a lot of this, extension of the wrist, to appease a visual criteria, like, oh, look how much.
God, I'm glad you addressed that. So in other words, some people may only have, right?
And they'll do this, like, oh, look at me go.
Yeah.
But, you have what you have. The idea isn't so much about strengthening, it's about activation. Right? So just getting into this position, keeping the elbow tucked in. So not flaring out, keeping the elbow straight down under the shoulder, and just extend here. So that's step 1. Step 2, always move the band. We're either using a band or a cable. You always want to move this to be at the plane of the elbow. So if I left this down here and was going to move into our second position, now I'd be using my rear delt to elevate and extend my shoulder. So we want to just have the resistance opposing rotation. So we're going to anchor this at elbow height. Now this is scaption, something we talked about off camera, that this is a position, so when we're addressing the rotator cuff, like I said earlier, they're all housed on the scapula and anchored on the humerus. So this, I want you to come right down there, that is a neutral plane of the shoulder. This is extension, right? That scapula is set on about 20 degrees of flexion. So that is a continuous joint plane between my humerus and my scapula. This is where we want to train a rotator cuff, not here. I'm using my rear delt to bring my shoulder into this position, and now I'll use this rear delt to rotate. When isolating the rotator cuff, we want to lay in that scaption position.
You see how it sunk down when you did that too.
Yeah, it should be just continuous.
This relaxed. You notice right with the first one, when you pull back here, this flare, see it flares up. That's your first sign. You feel it there. You just relax. It comes forward a tiny bit.
So band anchored at elbow height. Now from here, pure external rotation. And again, what you'll see a lot is people going into that extension to initiate the movement. We're stronger in the rear delts than the stability or the stabilizing muscles of a rotator cuff. So try and keep that anchored. Drill bit comes right through the elbow up into the shoulder. Externally rotate.
Again, keeping those wrists in that fixed position, right?
Exactly. Good. Now our last one, so all the progression we made so far is just height of the shoulder, right? We were at 0 degrees abduction. Now we're at 90 degrees. Now we're going to get into that full overhead. This is where you need the most shoulder stability. So from here, we're going to leave this anchored at elbow height. This is going to be our starting position. Loop through the back of the hand. Walk back into that scaption position. Now we're going to go through an overhead press. But now not an overhead press overcoming a vertical resistance. Now we're overcoming a horizontal resistance. Forcing that stability through the most unstable joint positions. Now, what I want you to focus on, keeping your elbow in front of your wrist is going to be the metric of how well you externally rotate.
Got it. So what he's saying right here is not allowing that band to pull you this way, which is going to feel natural because the band's pulling you.
Which is what you'll see as that joint approaches the most unstable position. So unstable shoulders, you'll see a lot of this. Start off fine. Once you cross that 90 degrees, you're going to lose some structural passive tension of some tendons crossing over that glenohumeral joint, and you'll get this. So you'll start internally rotating. Always try and focus, keeping that elbow in front of the wrist. Press right overhead, and always track right back down.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice and slow and controlled. Pay attention. It's all about the intention you do this with. Notice also, too, you pointed out when you're doing all those movements, the band is lined up with your elbow. Exactly. So that's a key tip there for sure. Hey, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share. Every single day we drop a new video. Also, after this video, there's a direct link to our 30 days of free coaching with Mind Pump. Check it out.